okay, across the globe, not just limited to Nigeria, not just limited to Africa, but across the globe. The reason is because topical issues always come up, and it's important for me to update you and to give some logical explanations to issues. Most instances, we have interviews from experts who give us an expert perspective to some of these issues that may seem complicated. I'm going to start off with something I consider that is a revolving conversation. It's not going to go off now. It's not something that will be done with now. So we'll continue to talk about it. I'm sure a couple of us already know about the conviction of Nnamdi Kanu. He's currently in Sokoto prison, and the conviction has been viewed from different lenses. There have been different perspectives. Some people believe that it was unfair for Justice Omotosho to sentence him to life imprisonment. Some people feel that's a due punishment for him. Some people even feel it's supposed to have been more. Also, victims, persons who went through the ordeal in the Southeast, how their family members were killed, harassed, how they had to leave the Southeast all through the period. And it has made a lot of Nigerians who do not know the genesis of the situation go back in time, all right, to learn what transpired, how the situation devolved to the point where IPOB, that was supposed to be an identification for the secession of a particular group who has felt isolated and marginalized in Nigeria, decided to become a group that was perceived to be a group of terror. And then all of the broadcast of Nnamdi Kanu also came out, and obviously a lot of persons were not happy with the outburst, with the expressions, with the divisive rhetorics and comments and the narratives that were out there. So again, we want to look at it from different lenses. Like I said, people who went through this ordeal with in the Southeast, specifically from 2021 up until 2023, it was really hot, that period, 2021 to 2023. I think they're the persons who will give us exact details, give us your picture of what transpired in the Southeast. How did the movement, how was it hijacked? How did IPOB, all right, a group that supposedly said they were peaceful, a group that was looking for the identification of the IGBOS, a group that wanted to be recognized by Nigeria, by the federal government of Nigeria, specifically with how they felt marginalized after the civil war. They've never felt included. They've always felt like they are outcast, and they started clamoring to be recognized. And if the government will not recognize them, if their regions will not be developed, if allocations will not be given to them in equal parts like they give other regions, then you should allow them go. So where did it get to this point where right now anybody who is agitating for Biafra, it feels like the person is a terrorist? And is that dream or idea, the ideology, is it ever going to come to pass? That's a big question. The modus operandi through which this method has been done with, was it the right way? Was it the right course? From MASOB to IPOB, what method? The method that MASOB employed, right? How come it didn't work? And then the method that Nnamdi Kanu tried to employ, how come it didn't work? Then there's the United States of Biafra, that's USB, which is obviously being controlled by Simon Ekpa, and now is being handled by Ngozi Oraweze. And the fact that it became a money milking machine. So you sell an idea to people whom you know want this. You take advantage of their plea, of their cry. You make money from them. And how come it is that the educated elites in the Southeast were actually the ones funding this idea, that it didn't seem possible ever since they have tried to get it? It hasn't worked. It hasn't seemed possible. The channels through which to achieve it has not been completely exhausted. And so what was the reality of them achieving this? I mean, it's complex. It's complex, and at the same time, it sounds simple. So let's look at the situation where the indigenous people of Biafra recently dismissed claims by Senator Orji Uzor Kalu that over 30,000 people have died due to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's activism in Nigeria's Southeast, calling the statement false and irresponsible. Senator Kalu, representing Abia North, said on Sunday during an appearance on Channels Television's Politics Today that secessionist agitations linked to the convicted IPOB leader had caused extensive fatalities and economic losses in the region. He stated, "Do you know that over 30,000 Igbos were killed? People who have shops have lost their businesses. I used to tell I used to sell my own manufactured products in Abia. I know what the numbers were. IPOB spokesman Ima Powerful rejected the figure in a press statement on Tuesday, demanding evidence to substantiate the senator's claims. Now, he said the worldwide family and movement of the IPOB denounces the irresponsible and false claims from Senator Orji Uzor that 30,000 individuals lost their lives due to Mazi and Kanu's activism in the Southeast region. This declaration arises from a malevolent spirit and a person who has chosen to batter his kin for selfish political gain. Powerful added that IPOB and its leader had remained non-violent despite military operations targeting their members. He claimed the insecurity, fatalities, and devastation that occurred in the Southeast were orchestrated by the federal government and certain Southeastern politicians to blackmail IPOB and ESN. The evidence shows that IPOB and Mazi Kanu have consistently been targets of military aggression, violence, and killings backed by the state. The group also called for impartial investigations into violence in the Southeast since 2015, asserting that the federal government has yet to allow an independent inquiry. The IPOB is urging Orji Uzor Kalu to present proof of his assertions. As far as Mazi Kanu and IPOB are concerned, we bear no responsibility for the death of any Igbo individual or the damage to businesses in the East. Senator Kalu's comments followed Kanu's conviction on terrorism-related charges. Okay, so let's go back to point in time. In 2012, 2013, thereabout, Nnamdi Kanu started this whole conversation about the emancipation of the Southeast, and not just from the Southeast, basically Nigeria. During the Jonathan administration, we experienced insecurity. We already knew about the abduction of Chibok girls. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was in the UK at the time, where there was a protest. He was part of what he said Nigeria needed to be free at all costs, and that the government of the day needs to be decisive in handling insecurity so that there will be peace in Nigeria. That was how it started. He also started with several interviews talking about the challenges that the Southeast and Nigerians were going through in the hands of Fulani terrorists. It was very, very peaceful. It was quite assertive. But at the time, you know, he wasn't gaining the momentum. Obviously, he wrote articles. He was part of interviews. Sahara Reporters was a major media tool through which he was able to propagate his expressions and ideas as to what was going on in the Nigerian government. Then, obviously, in 2015, Nnamdi Kanu returned to Nigeria. Before he returned to Nigeria, Nnamdi Kanu started talking about a lot of atrocities being committed by the Nigerian government. He also talked about insecurity, talked about a lot of things, and that was during the administration of late Muhammadu Buhari. Now, Nnamdi Kanu called out the administration of Buhari, said that Buhari was not the person in power, that Buhari was dead. He said Buhari was a clone. He also talked about the agenda of Fulanis and the Islamization of Nigeria, how the Southeast could be a port of call for it. A lot of historical patterns came on board, and he became quite, assertive in stating emphatically what IPOB represented and how it was important for the Southeast to be safe, for the Southeast to become a country on its own, devoid of what he considered to be the malevolence and the negative attributes and disposition of the Nigerian federal government, which was headed by, at the time, Muhammadu Buhari. When that situation happened in 2015, Nnamdi Kanu came to Nigeria. I don't know what brought him to Nigeria. I don't understand, but I don't know if nobody told him that he was already on the watch list of the Buhari-led government. His rhetorics, his statements, all of the narratives, all of the messages he was putting out on Biafran radio was being monitored by the Nigerian government. His broadcasts were circulating on Facebook at the time, also on Twitter, and people began to listen to him. People began to get to understand him. A lot of Igbos in diaspora who also were going through the ordeal or the disenfranchisement from the Nigerian government were beginning to listen to him. The youth too in the Southeast who literally did not understand the history, specifically of what happened during the Civil War, were beginning to listen, were beginning to open their eye, were beginning to understand what was happening. And so he was gaining momentum. People were listening to him. So in 2015, Nnamdi Kanu came to Nigeria, and he was in a particular hotel, I think first Golden Tulip Hotel in Festac thereabout, and that was where, you know, he was first apprehended. The DSS traced him to that hotel. They searched all the rooms. Eventually, they saw him with, I think, either a woman or two women, and a couple of the things that he came along with, and that was how he was arrested. Nnamdi Kanu was arrested first by the Buhari government in 2015. He was in custody for more than a year thereabout when he was eventually granted bail. Senator Oyinaya Barabe was one of the persons that stood shorty for him. Now, Nnamdi Kanu was granted bail and then decided to go home. While he actually went home, when I mean home here in Nigeria, he did not travel out of the country. Because of the kind of widespread recognition he had gotten, he was looked at as a Moses, a Bible, sort of. There was this supposed aura around him. He got a lot of supporters, followers, people who believed in him. He was a force, a movement to be reckoned with. Nnamdi Kanu would appear somewhere. The crowd that was thronged to come see him was massive, and the Southeast governors became apprehensive. They were not comfortable with the kind of authority, the kind of aura, the kind of support and love that Nnamdi Kanu got in the region that they were in charge of, that the Southeastern governors were in charge of. They couldn't call out the people like Nnamdi Kanu could call out. They couldn't tell the people what to do, and they would come out en masse to be part of it. Nnamdi Kanu actually was able to generate that attraction, that attention from a lot of Southeast youth specifically. And like I said, obviously, you know, this politics became another situation. The Southeastern governors were not comfortable with how he was amassing support and the kind of set of persons that were coming around him. Nnamdi Kanu was not identified as a Christian. He identified himself as a Jew, and that was basically what happened. So anybody who wanted any form of solicitation, advice, ideas, policies, rather than going to the right political channel, they will always come to Nnamdi Kanu to either seek counsel, to get their permission, one thing or the other. And like I said, the Southeastern governors were not comfortable with it. They did not like it, and this was where the politics scattered and the hunt for Nnamdi Kanu's life happened. At some point, Nnamdi Kanu was supposed to, from his home, appear in court after he was granted bail for his session in court to continue until the Nigerian army invaded his home. Up to today, we don't know why they invaded his home. They killed people there. They destroyed things in his home. Nnamdi Kanu escaped by a whisker. Like literally a whisker. We wouldn't even be talking about him by now. If they had caught him that day, they would have shot him. And the Nigerian government would have lied that when they came, he possibly resisted any form of arrest, and that was what happened. Or he was caught in a crossfire. Or they could even lie that he was in the midst of some IPOB terrorists, as the federal government had alleged. They could even lie that he was in their midst, and that was how there was an open fire, and unfortunately, he was part of the casualty. A lot of things could have actually happened, but Nnamdi Kanu escaped. But Nnamdi Kanu escaped. Nobody knew where he was. They didn't see his body amongst those that were already killed in his premises. They didn't know what happened, but they didn't see his body, and they didn't know where he went. So people were asking, where is Nnamdi Kanu? Where has he gone? Where has he been? If he's dead, let's see his body. The parents were also not happy with what happened at the time, and they got high blood pressure. The whole situation was frazzling on their nerves. Due to that, they passed on. I think one of the parents sustained a gunshot wound thereabout, and they both passed on. They died. Nobody knew where Nnamdi Kanu was, but the person who told us that Nnamdi Kanu was still alive and that he escaped was the Senator Orji Uzor Kalu. He was one who told us that Nnamdi Kanu was alive and that he was okay. Apparently, Nnamdi Kanu escaped by the whiskers via ship. Okay, not through an airplane. Obviously, the Interpol already had his picture, so if he had gone through the normal airport route, he would have been caught. So he escaped through a ship. He left the shores of Nigeria through the high sea, through the water. And so after a very long time, then we now began to hear him speak via Radio Biafra from the UK. And that was when Nnamdi Kanu really became quite aggressive in his pronouncements and in his statements. Now, remember that before that, the South is experiencing certain anomalies of insecurity, either court clashes, Fulani terrorists, the Nigerian government, because of what happened, they sent armies there. There was some kind of unrest. Young persons were killed and nobody was taking responsibility. Persons were caught and branded to be IPOB members without any form of trial. Injustice was really pervading the land in the Southeast. Now, the confusion was that nobody knew whether it was in collaboration with the Southeastern governors, or in fact, there was just palpable tension, there was confusion. Nobody knew what was happening. The worst part was sometime in 2017 when a group of young persons were sitting together and somehow the Nigerian military got there and killed all of them. They said they were terrorists and they were conniving against the Nigerian government. This was where the Southeasterners said we can no longer continue like this. And Nnamdi Kanu got wind of what happened and said, how would they be killing our people like chickens just because we're advocating for our rights to freedom, our right to be recognized by the federal government? If we will not be given freedom, if we will not be given a right, then it's better for us to leave this contraption, according to a couple of people. Let's leave this contraption called Nigeria. You wouldn't let us go, so let's find our way. And when we say we want to find our way, you kill us off. That's what Nnamdi Kanu really got angry, and so he started spilling unhindered, unhinged, and a couple of persons did not like some of the statements he made at all. The Eastern Security Network was created because they wanted to combat Fulani invasion of the farmlands, and they were quite active at the time, to be honest with you. It actually prevented the Fulani terrorists from gaining access into farmland. They were in the forest, in the bush. They were at the time, trying to protect the southeastern territory. The Southeast governors were also not happy with the emergence of Eastern Security Network. To them, they felt that Nnamdi Kanu did not carry the governors along and that were not legally recognized, that the Eastern Security Network were not legally recognized, and that was because the person who put them together was Nnamdi Kanu, whom the Southeast governors did not like, whom they were not comfortable with, because he commanded authority and control that the Southeast governors wished they had. And as usual, Nnamdi Kanu was not politically inclined into their ideals. Again, I'm taking you back in time so we understand what happened. We're not trying to isolate the fact that some of the statements he made or that the Eastern Security Network that was created did not also commit some atrocities. You do not kill your people regardless of the kind of message you're passing across. Unfortunately, because Nnamdi Kanu was in the UK at the time, he was not on ground, the movement was infiltrated. How, I don't know. I cannot really give you details. If you're in the comment section, you're watching this video later and can give us details. What I know is the fact that Igboagbo was eventually created by the governor then, Hope Uzodinma, who obviously was not meant to be the governor of Imo State. He was number 4 and the Supreme Court gave him number 1. It was supposed to be the next in line, but that was not Hope Uzodinma, and that was where the disparity commenced. That was where the Southeast really this is not making sense. A couple of persons felt Hope Uzodinma was a tool of Muhammadu Buhari to cause mayhem in the Southeast. So Igboagbo was created. And when they were created, what happened? They were meant to combat insecurity in the Southeast. IPOB on several occasions, most of the volatility experienced in the Southeast always distanced themselves. The spokespersons always said, we are not the ones, we are not a violent group of people. Unfortunately, what IPOB spokesperson was saying was not in consonant with the expletives coming from the UK via Biafra radio. So Nnamdi Kanu was aggressive, Nnamdi Kanu was making statements, was calling for arms, was going for conferences, advocating for arms and weapons to, arm the youth in the forest to guard our territory against the federal government and against the Fulani terrorists. So anytime there is any atrocity committed in the Southeast at the time, they always branded it on IPOB. It was really bad. Igboagbo got so terrible that nobody knew what they were doing, if they were helping the Southeasterners or specifically persons in Imo State, or they were killing their own people. The thing was, killings were on the rise. It was terrible. It increased significantly. It was worrisome. Igboagbo became a group that was now seen as a terror group. So most of the mayhem and atrocities committed, you couldn't differentiate whether it was Igboagbo or Eastern Security Network. The next thing, we started hearing of unknown gunmen. Those persons did not have a name or a tag. They were basically Asari Dukubo's boys. He had a contract with the federal government of Nigeria, conscripted his men to assist the Nigerian military in the Southeast. According to them, they were to create calm. But that was not what happened. The military men became money takers. They were siphoning money, taking money from persons who tried to have an entrance into the Southeast. They were not within the communities. And so ESN, who were in the bush, along with Igboagbo, sometimes they fight each other. Sometimes Igboagbo would do something and claim that it is IPOB. It got to a point nobody knew who was killing people. But anytime there was any recorded death, they would always say it's IPOB. The Nigerian military goes into a community, kills a set of people, they will say it's IPOB. young persons were killed. We didn't see any form of prosecution process. If these young persons will be taken to court to be tried, there was no trial. Immediately they just see you, they kill you. So young persons were hiding in their homes. They couldn't come out. They couldn't go to work. Mondays was sit at home. It was terrible. It was a very terrible experience. So that movement, the Eastern Security Network, or the agenda that was set up by Nnamdi Kanu, was taken over. Certain elements adulterated what effect or what message it wanted to create. So it was now seen from a lens of violence. Obviously, if you had read some Nigerian newspapers at the time, where there were statements that the Buhari government used the governor of Imo State as well as the Nigerian military to infiltrate mayhem in the southeast. So Ibago was a tool used against its own people. The military was conscripted to the southeast to create chaos and pin it on IPOB. So when the killings became too much, we were seeing videos of people beheaded, hands cut. It was brutal, it was bloody. Children were no longer allowed to go to school. Unseated homes, markets were razed, shops were burnt down, people everywhere was scattered, so people could no longer stay in the southeast. Communities mostly affected: Osu, Mbitoli, Mbano, Lilu. Most communities like that were highly affected, especially in Imo State and Anambra State, by what was going on. And I want to ask you something. You couldn't define whether it was unknown gunmen, whether it was IPOB, whether it was the Nigerian military, or whether it was the Eastern Security Network. So because the movement was already infiltrated, anything that happened was pinned on IPOB. You guys, the videos were gory. It was terrible. I'm telling you, it was terrible. You need to see the videos. You wouldn't believe what was going on to our people. So it was like the civil war had come back again. The Southeast has been a region that has always gone through this kind of violence. The violence, the killings has always been consistent. And unfortunately, they have always been put out by their politicians, their leaders who has never protected their interests or understood the significance of protecting them at all costs. You also had a couple of youth who were also brainwashed, who did not understand what the movement was about. So that was basically how the Southeast became a zone that was like a red zone. Investment couldn't come in. People left the Southeast in droves. They dispersed to other cities, other states. Some people traveled outside the country. Communities were deserted. Businesses and shops were locked down. The sit at home on Mondays also crippled activities there. And the Southeast became an unattractive space for investment opportunities. A lot of young persons too, who were idle, who did not have anything to do, either tried to join the movement, did not even know what movement they were joining. A lot of boys went missing. Parents were asking for their children. They said their children go out to the farm, and then by late in the evening they don't see them. They ask questions, where are they? They report to the police station, nothing is done, and you just see their kids disappear. Nobody can tell you precisely what happened. A lot of killings were taking place, and terrible things were going on, all right, in the Southeast. The conversation about IPOB became a negative one, and the ideology now was mutilated. Nnamdi Kanu eventually was apprehended in Kenya, extraordinarily renditioned in Kenya, I think in 2021. Yes, 2021 thereabout. And immediately Nnamdi Kanu was brought back to Nigeria and kept in DSS custody. The movement was in disarray and there was confusion. So some of the persons in the movement became, I don't know, they personalized the whole agenda, started milking money from community members. Either they lost track. Some of them tried to stay away from it, while those that remained in it decided to use it for personal purposes. So those who were affected, whose family members were killed by the atrocities of these individuals. Remember, I told you, IPOB had always distanced itself from the killings, but there was unknown gunmen, there was Ibubago, there was Asari Dokubo boys, there was Biafran Liberation Army. I think that one even came after Nnamdi Kanu was extraordinarily renditioned and kept incarcerated. The whole Simon Ekpa rhetoric came on board. The Biafran government in exile, and then the Biafran Liberation Army, that's BLA, which is the militant arm or the military arm of Simon Ekpa in Nigeria. Now, we don't know what happened, but Simon Ekpa was always putting out narratives on social media that they were giving the Nigerian federal government soldiers woto. We saw pictures, we saw videos of some of the atrocities carried out on Nigerian soldiers, saying that the Nigerian soldiers do not have any right to be in the Biafran territory. Again, this brought more attention secession into the southeast. So when they go there, do their normal raids, they bring out young boys from their homes, kill them. Some of the traditional leaders who tried to seek for peace were also killed. And most of these things were also pinned on IPOB. Young persons too got brainwashed, got disconnected from the reality of what they were supposed to do. And again, everything was on IPOB. A lot of our youths were also killed in the process. And this was where the politicization of the actualization of the indigenous people of Biafra came in. The movement was adulterated. Some of the boys who were supposedly part of the agenda for protecting the Southeast were now being used by the Southeastern politicians against themselves. Anybody who spoke against IPOB was killed. Kidnappings became on the rise. They were kidnapping for as low as 30,000 naira because a lot of persons left the Southeast. Hunger became very on the increase. There were no business opportunities, so people were now having to alternate and divert into kidnapping, and hostilities were being carried out. Like I said, if you want to give a hang a dog, you give it a bad name, and that was what happened. So every atrocity being committed in the Southeast was actually being pinned on IPOB, and the Nigerian military did not even give you any time for mercy. It was shoot aside. The special police arm, that was set up to supposedly clear IPOB from the bushes, did not also go through the judicial process. They catch you, is either they kill you. If they don't kill you, they'll whisk you away to the north. You are taken to Niger State, this Sokoto that Kanu is right now, either Niger State, Sokoto, any of the places where your parents cannot have access to you. Remember that these are struggling parents who are farmers, who do not have the money. How did they start trying to locate you? All the way in Niger State, Nasarawa, or Sokoto. A lot of young men, a lot of young boys, a lot of youth in their 40s, 30s, 15, 20 were taken away, whisked away into these custodial centers without trial, without proper representation. Their rights stripped away from them. They were literally mutilated at every point in time. And so those who were still in prison had nobody to represent them. There was no prosecuting counsel. It was a terrible situation. The movement was actually taken over by certain elements who did not mean well for the Southeasterners. So, but we had a lot of persons who were not happy with what happened. There were a lot of persons who did not like, because of the violence that ensued from IPOB, a lot of persons did not want to be part of it. A lot of persons did not want to be part of it at all. They did not want to be part of the movement. They did not want anything to do with the movement anymore. They didn't want to be recognized with it. They were all afraid. They didn't understand the agenda. They didn't know what to do. And so the fact that they were victims, that people were killed, they no longer wanted the actualization for the indigenous people of Biafra. They didn't want to be part of it. So I understand those people not happy with IPOB. I understand them feeling that IPOB killed them. IPOB took them away. IPOB took their right. IPOB kept their communities in disarray. I understand that. And I expect people to please respect the views and perception of these persons because of the ordeal they went through. They went through terrible ordeal, because when your person is killed, your mother is killed, your younger brother is dragged from his home, shot. You need to see those videos. You need to see it. It was terrible. So when you see the videos of how your young persons were mutilated, killed at no reason, disappeared, missing, you would definitely not want to be part of the movement. Whether it is unknown gunmen, whether it's the Nigerian military or the Nigerian police, Igboagu or IPOB, you don't care. The fact is, it is the whole insignia, the whole IPOB agenda is what caused your family member to be in the crosshairs, and so to them they were traumatized. So the idea of IPOB is not palatable to them. They refuse to be part of IPOB. They refuse to recognize IPOB, and it's important for you to understand where they are coming from. It is these people who died that is what they are convicting Nnamdi Kanu on, by saying that it is his splitters, rhetorics, all the things he said, go and do this, buy weapons, burn down, do this. That is why they are attaching all the atrocities that took place in the Southeast. They're putting it on his head because he is the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. They say terrorism doesn't necessarily mean that you were the one who committed the crime. You don't necessarily have to hold a weapon. You don't have to hold a knife to slit somebody. You don't necessarily need to have a gun. When you supposedly make statements and the actuality of the statement is what happened, they will attach whatever happened to you It is expected. So when Nnamdi Kanu said what he said via Biafran radio, when all the things he was saying was exactly what was happening, they were obviously pinning it on IPOB. Did Nnamdi Kanu make mistakes? Yes, he did. Was he supposed to put a lead on some of the expressions he said? Yes. Was he strategic? No. Was he betrayed by the people in his movement? Yes. Some of the politicians who he was supposedly speaking with, who gave him an assurance, who gingered him to say, you're doing the right thing, you're on the right path, and we are supporting you, betrayed him. It is very true. So yes, was there tact deployed? No. The strategy now is a question. What other means of strategy can be applied for those who believe that they no longer want to be part of Nigeria, to do it via legal means where you will get a lot of people to support you and there'll be no bloodshed? The Southeast has always shed blood because they want to emancipate themselves from Nigeria. It's the same pattern. The 1966 war was bloody, and the Southeast paid dearly for it. Okay? Then it continued. It continued, it didn't stop. The Masov movement, the same thing. No matter how peaceful it was the same thing. The people were killed. So anytime they talk about we want to emancipate, we want to be recognized, we want to be an indigenous set of people, we don't want to be part of the contraption called Nigeria, like a lot of people say, you will see the kind of heavy treatment that will be dealt with. Nobody has ever called these individuals for a dialogue. What do you want? What can we do for you? Like they do with the terrorists in the north and the bandits and Eastwap or whatever. Nobody has called to say, what do you want? Nobody has called to negotiate. When it comes to anything that has to do with the Igbos, the gavel of the law, the might of the military is handed down on them. There is no opportunity for you to negotiate. There's no opportunity for dialogue. There's no opportunity for conversation. And that is why the marginalization, the isolation, and the ill treatment is still being felt by the Southeasterners up till now. So the big question is this. Nnamdi Kanu seems to be supposedly paying the price for the freedom of a set of people who has felt they've never been part of Nigeria. And what will be the next line of action? It's important for his legal team to know how they're going to appeal it, because a couple of persons have said the judgment is a travesty. So how will the Southeast gain its identification? How will the Southeast gain its pride? How will the Igbos gain their respect? That is a big question. The whole insignia of IPOB, the whole situation that involved IPOB has made a lot of persons hide. They don't want to come out and project because it's not something that has been given a good name, but the struggle still continues. So what is the next line of action? What is the strategy that will be applied by this current generation who are young, who are vibrant, who are intelligent, for whatever it is they're clamoring for to be recognized? And then in terms of politics, so the Nigerian government has always said that if you want to be recognized, you have to be part of the political system. How do you make the political system welcoming and accommodating for a group of people you've always despised, whom you've always felt are not part of Nigeria? And that is why a couple of them refuse to be part of the politics. So the new set of people are saying now that, especially for the Gen Z, they're encouraging them to join Nigerian politics so that you can have a lot of Southeastern representatives, since the old ones have not done duly well. They have not represented well. They've sold out their people. They have not called for the recognition of their people. The Southeast has not really been developed for quite a long time. They've also suffered bad leadership. The Southeast has not really experienced good leadership. Only very recently in Abia State, Alex Oti, Anambra State for quite a little, Enugu State as well. But Imo State is not it at all. They've had terrible leaders represent them, and it has also depreciated how the people in the Southeast are looked at. So you have people in the Southeast complaining about the isolation and the injustice of the Nigerian government against them, while those in their political class are not speaking up for them. They're in bed with the federal government and also putting aside the pleas and the cries of their people. There is a major disparity. So how do you get leaders who will represent the interests of the Igbos, the Southeasterners at the federal level? How do you infiltrate the polity and have majority of your people in the polity, so that when you raise a bill for secession, for a referendum, whatever it is, then it should be put into consideration? That is basically what should be the conversation now. The case of Nnamdi Kanu is a very sensitive one and needs to be dealt with carefully. The Southeasterners and the Igbos also need to be very careful so that the entire might of the federal government is not handed down again on the Southeast. Remember that a lot of people in the Southeast have left. There is a depopulation there. The region is just beginning to get itself back from everything that has happened to them in the past 5 years. The killing hasn't stopped, so you have people in the Southeast suffering from the military, the police, known gunmen, and you also have them suffering from a malignment, a misconception. So how do you regain the respect of the Southeast with the Igbos, and how do you integrate them back in the polity? There's huge tribalism, specifically more experience within this administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Also, Peter Obi being part of the politics in 2023, contesting for president of Nigeria was also something that a lot of them did not expect, because he got a lot of love and massive support, not just in the Southeast, but also across other regions. And it's also another thing that could be the bane of his political career. I don't know how the political career of Peter Obi would actually continue from here, but based on what happened in 2023, there has been a deliberate plan to malign anybody from that region and to say we're not going to allow anyone from that region to represent this country anymore. So the question is, if you hold a referendum, would you have everyone who are considered to be Igbos want Biafra? Would you think everyone who are considered to be Igbos want to be part of IPOB? Because of what has happened, there needs to be a reorientation and a re-strategization of how the indigenous people of Biafra, or the indigenous people, the Igbos, precisely, would be recognized and taken seriously. A re-strategization that would include every other person supporting that idea or that agenda. And it's something that possibly needs to start now, carefully, strategically planned, if that is truly what the Igbos want. The case of insecurity has become quite bedeviling, terrible, to be honest with you, and it's quite unfortunate that the Nigerian government is sleeping. Very recently, we were told that I think Bayo Nanaga, the spokesperson of the president, and the IGP, the Inspector General of Police, told us that the terrorists dropped their weapons. There was a peaceful negotiation. They dropped their weapons and they released those girls. Well, we saw a video released by ISWAP and the bandits or the terrorists telling us that they called them and spoke with them, and it was based on the conversation they had that he released those girls. It's not like there was any firepower or anything. They were the ones who called them to negotiate peacefully with them for the release of those girls. There's a difference with what Bayanana is telling us, what the Inspector General of Police is telling us, and what is actually happening right now, because the terrorists released a video where they were telling them that your people could not save you. We were the ones who just decided to release you. So right now, the APC as a government is not happy at all, and a lot of persons within their arm are complaining bitterly about what is going on in Nigeria. They call the APC a political party that is filled with terrorism, or a political party of terrorists. But at the same time, everyone is now trying to protect themselves. So when everyone is holding weapons, when everyone is carrying weapons, trust me, it could lead to anarchy. So are Nigerians helpless at this point? We haven't gotten to that point where we are helpless. We still have a strong team, but it is important for decisive measures to be taken to address the issue of insecurity. Very decisive. This is not the time for the federal government to sleep on its hours. This is not the time for the federal government to politicize it. Right now, we don't know if the security situation in Nigeria is politics. We don't know whether it is religious, and we don't even know whether it's intertribal. It is terrible and it is bad. The worst part is that it is the Nigerian people, the innocent ones who don't have the money, the poor ones who are literally trying to navigate the harsh economic realities. They are the casualties, they're the collateral damage in this entire ordeal. If it were the politicians, if it were the senators, that's a different thing. They're not the ones going through this ordeal. So it is very vital and imperative for the federal government to do something decisive now. Otherwise, the precedent will be dangerous, and we may not have Nigeria in the next few years. All right, make sure you subscribe. I would like to know what your comments are. I'd like to also know your contributions based on what we have discussed here. And follow, like, subscribe, share. Have yourself a wonderful evening, or rather wonderful afternoon. Okay, it is also very necessary that if at all we're asking for a referendum, then a referendum is meant to determine the fate of those who want to be part of the Biafran struggle, who want to be part of the Biafran nation, and choose its leader wisely. Like I said, there's a lot of misconception. People have forgotten the history of what has started off the agitation in the Southeast, what started off the whole movement of IPOB, what brought Nnamdi Kanu into the picture, how he took it upon himself. There is a lot of misconception, and things need to be properly put out there. So there's a proper enlightenment, so people do not just call everybody a terrorist or say everyone is IPOB. And for those who do not want to be part of the struggle for Biafra or IPOB, who are Igbos, you don't blame them, you don't insult them, you don't blame them. Everyone is free on their ideals. If they do not go with the idea or the agenda of IPOB or the ideology of Biafra, you don't blame them. You don't call them anything. It's their right to identify as what they want to identify. It's their right to say, I don't support what is going on. I don't recognize it. I want to live my life. I think I want a peaceful life. I don't think I have the energy for any kind of struggle or whatever. It's their right. So anyone who refuses to identify with the whole movement of IPOB or the whole Biafran struggle, you do not blame them. You do not call them names, and you do not insult them. You can never tell people how to feel. You cannot dictate to people how to feel, especially families that went through the entire ordeal for the past 5 years, who died in the melee of this nonsense that took place in the Southeast, which were caused by the politicians. So you do not blame them for having to distance themselves from the conception of IPOB. All right. Have yourself an amazing day. Bye for now.